Hello and welcome to this review of Warhammer 40,000, 10th edition. Dun dun dun! That's right folks, GW have sent me this free of charge for your reviewing pleasure. It's a pretty book. It's a very pretty book. And it has got a cat's tail walking in front of it is what it's got right now. So what are we going to cover in this review? Well, it is a big book. It is a big book, and there's lots of really nice stuff in here, as there always is with a new edition release box book. There's stuff about all the individual factions. There's lots of showcasey type stuff, lots of really nice pictures of new minis and dioramas and all sorts of similar things. There's also, which I won't be reviewing, but I have looked at it, there's also, as well as the section on how Crusade actually works, there's also a campaign for the models that you get in the box. I don't know if that was there previously, but glancing at it, it looks like if that were the kind of thing it looks like quite a good one. And if that were the kind of thing I did, I might be interested in doing that. So what I'm going to review are just the rules, and I'm going to review them from my particular perspective. So regular viewers of my channel will know I'm very much focused on the narrative, and I'll talk about what I think from a narrative perspective of the rules. I'm not going to go into the detail on the ins and outs of each rule. There's a little summary. There's a little summary for each rule, and I'm going to use that summary to talk through it. And I'll cover what I think's good in this edition, and I think what is not so good in this edition. Yeah. So, without further ado, the first thing that leaps out at you is the pages for the rules are weirdly numbered. So the core rules start on page something like, come on, give me a page number, something like 200. But they have their own numbering from 1 through to 60 odd. Presumably that's so any page references from future books that are just the rules will be the same in this book and in other books. God, it's very heavy to hold. It's such a heavy book. So I'm just going to go through it page by page, and deal with and go through it that way. So first off, there's an overview of the phases: command, move, shoot, charge, fight. No longer a psychic phase, and there's no longer a morale phase. Core concepts: what an army is, what units are, unit coherency. Within 2 inches horizontally and 5 inches horizontally of other models in the same unit, of one other model in the same unit, if the model has between 2 and 6 models. If it has more than 7 models, 2 models from the same unit must be within 2 inches horizontally and vertically. At the end of a turn, unit models, if a model is not in coherency, the controlling player must remove models until that unit is in coherency again. Engagement range: 1 inch horizontally and 5 inches vertically. Models cannot set up or end a normal move, advance, fall back within engagement range of any enemy model. Fairly similar, fairly standard. There's then a specific thing about what a model being visible, a unit being visible, a model fully visible, and a unit fully visible is. And there are little pictures to illustrate. As you might expect, a model is visible if you can see some of it. It is fully visible if you can see the entire model. A unit is visible if a model is visible. And a unit is fully visible if every model is fully visible. Who'd have thought it, eh? Some specifics on how to roll a d3, and then re-rolls. Clarifying that unmodified dice are the results after re-rolls but before modifiers. Dice can never be re-rolled more than once. If you must roll... If you're rolling dice to add together, like roll 2d6 and add them together, and you're re-rolling, you must re-roll all the dice. Re-rolls are applied before modifiers. Right, now we start to get into it. So the command phase. Both players gain a command point and then resolve any other rules that occur in the command phase. I haven't seen anything anywhere in the core rules section that refers to any other ways to gain command points. But both players gain a command point, so it's not just in your turn, it's in your opponent's turn as well, so you'll get 2 in each battle round. So a standard 5 battle round game, you get 10 CP. I like that. It means you can save up for something big, but a big thing, you can't do lots of big things in round 1, but you can... you're also never long without command points if you've already spent them all. More similar to the way AOS works. So I'm trying that. More similar to the way AOS works, except they don't disappear at the end of the command phase. You can at the end of the battle round. You can save them up. Now, I'm conscious a lot of these rules will have been previewed on Warhammer Community, but at time of recording, I don't know what's been reviewed or previewed at time of word stuff. So I'm just going to go over it. Battle shock is the next thing that happens in the command phase. Now, it's a different take on morale. Morale is not about models running away anymore. That was an 8th, 9th ed thing. Previous editions, it was models moving backwards, physically running away. 8th and 9th, it was running away means being removed as a casualty. 10th's different. So any unit that's below half strength, you take a battle shock test. You're at 2d6 and you want it to be equal or under the leadership. If it's passed, you're fine. Otherwise, the unit is battle shocked until the start of your next command phase. A battle shocked unit has an objective control of 0, and the controlling player cannot use stratagems on them. So you can't hold objectives, and they basically can't receive orders. And any battle-shocked unit that falls back must make a desperate escape test. So we come to desperate escape later on, but basically it's chance of model dying if it falls back in certain circumstances. So if your unit's basically broken, battle-shocked, and is running away, some of them might die. Of course, that may be preferable to standing there and carrying on fighting at whatever has been murdering them to date. So starting strength is fairly self-explanatory. If it's below half strength, it's below half the number of models that you start with. If the unit has only one model in it, you go off the number of wounds. So characters and monsters and vehicles can be battle shocked. Attached units, so characters can join units again. Come on to that in a bit. Well, it's actually quite straightforward. The the character joins a unit, and then they are the last casualty of the unit, if I've remembered that correctly. Come on to that in a bit more detail. From a battle shock perspective, the leader counts as a model in the unit. Therefore, you work out the starting strength based on that. When it because the character is always the last to die, when it reverts back to being just the character, you go off their number of wounds. It goes back to being an individual model. Right, movement phase. Move units. Make a normal move, advance, or remain stationary. No change there. Units that are in engagement range of enemy models can only fall back or remain stationary. Pretty standard. Normal move. Move up to M inches. Cannot move within engagement range of enemy models. Nah, standard. Same. Advance. Move plus D6. Cannot go within engagement range. Units that advance cannot charge or shoot this turn. Fallback moves. Make a fallback move. Models can move up to M inches. Units that fall back cannot shoot, declare a charge. Models can move over enemy models when falling back, but you must make desperate escape tests for them before you do so, excluding models that are titanic or can fly. If a battle shock unit is selected to fall back, they make a desperate escape test for every model in that unit. A desperate escape test. Roll a dice for each model. On a 1 or a 2, that model is destroyed. Sorry, no, on a 1 or a 2, one model from that unit is destroyed. So that's a distinction there, and I'm sure this will lead to confusion. So, if you're falling back with the whole unit and the unit is battle shocked, yeah, okay, you got to roll for everyone and you pick which one. But this kind of implies, and it's very possibly actually in the big Gubbinsy words that I'm going nowhere near. But in theory, you could interpret that as meaning when an individual model has to pass over an enemy model, you take a battle shock test, but any model in the unit could be removed as a casualty. I won't be doing that. If a model is being battle shocked, it dies. Moving over terrain. Bit different, better. Models can move freely over terrain features 2 inches or less in height. Nice and simple, nice and straightforward. Models cannot move through terrain taller than 2 inches, but climb up and down them. Distance up, distance down. Happy with that. Flying models can move over when they make a normal advanced or fallback move. And you measure the distance diagonally from where they start to where they finish. Reinforcements. Reserve units. A unit that starts the battle in a location other than the battlefield. Always count as having made a normal move in turns they are set up on the battlefield. Does that imply they can charge? Applies to me, they can charge and shoot. Any specified distance from the enemy model applies to horizontal difference, not diagonal difference. So you can't have an enemy in the building here, and you go, oh, well, they're 9 inches up. I'm going to deep strike at the bottom of them because I'm 9 inches away. It's horizontal distance. Any reserves not set up on the battlefield by the end of the battle are destroyed. I prefer that to the middle rounds. So, I like. Okay, transports. We have a whole double page on transports. So, they have a transport capacity as usual. You can have units embarked in them when you set them up, obviously. Firing deck is a new rule. I think that kind of replaces the... Oh god, open top. No, that's previous editions. So some units have rules. Let's say let's say models can fire even though it's a vehicle. The way they have dealt with it on here, which the rules don't kind of fit with the narrative in a sense, but the end result is the same, and it's a sleeker way of doing it, so I have no problem with it. They have the Firing Deck X rule. Each time the transport shoots, select one weapon from up to X models that are embarked within it, and the transport counts as being equipped with those weapons as well. Now, presumably, I mean, that basically just means X models can fire out with one weapon. Where I guess that might be problematic is where certain models have to hit values that are better than the vehicle, or worse, I suppose. I suppose you could argue that with the better shots, the vehicle is kind of jostling them around, but then again, why wouldn't that make everyone else a worse shot? Yeah, should that ever come up, I think I would be firing better shots at the higher ballistic skill, but... Oh, no. That's not how it'll work. Because the ballistic skill is on the weapon, it'll always be the same value. Yeah, that works. That works perfectly. Right, embarking. A unit can embark if all of its models end a normal, advance, or fallback move within 3 inches of the transport. Works for me. A unit cannot embark and disembark in the same phase. Fair enough. Disembark. Units that start your movement phase embarked in a transport can disembark this phase, provided their transport has not advanced or fallen back. So you can't get out if a transport has fallen back, but does that imply you can disembark if the vehicle is engaged but hasn't fallen back? Let me carry on. If a unit disembarks before a transport moves, it can act normally. If a unit disembarks after a transport moves, it cannot move or charge this turn, but can otherwise act normally. So you can either get out and do what you want, or wait till the vehicle's moved, get out and shoot. Disembarking units must be set up wholly within 3 inches of the transport and not within engagement range of enemy models, or the unit cannot disembark. So if your vehicle is has got enemies attacking it, is engaged, then you can only get out if the models aren't going to end up in engagement range of the ones that are attacking. Units that disembark this turn cannot remain stationary. Huh? Oh, okay. So that's just a way of saying they count as having moved, but they don't want to say count. Yeah, okay, I get that. That's two simple sentences to cover all of it, even though it seems counterintuitive. Right, destroying transports. If a transport is destroyed, any embarked unit must disembark. Roll a dice for each model that disembarks. On a 1, the unit suffers a mortal wound as opposed to being destroyed. That's much better. Makes much more sense. You get 5 Terminators climbing out of a Land Raider and you roll a 1. Okay, one of them's injured, not dead. You roll 3 ones. You've lost a Terminator, not the unit, pretty much. Like that. Until the start of the controlling player's next turn, the disembarked unit is battle shocked. I like that as well. So, it has happened in the past that people treat the transport as a disposable paper carton, and moving it and then being shot out of it is the desirable result because it kind of there's a penalty to treating it that way. Your unit's battle shocked because you can't play stratagems on them, and they have an objective control of 0. Until the end of the turn, the disembarking unit counts as having made a normal move and cannot declare a charge. So I guess that's for if you get shot out in your own turn. get disembark. So it's not called disembarking. Oh yes, it is. Yes, it is. So you don't have all the freedom of disembarking the model, the transport, before it's been blown to smithereens. You don't have the same amount of move freedom or charge freedom. Right, emergency disembarkation. I like this. This is good. If you can't set up the unit wholly within 3, you must perform an emergency disembarkation. You set up as many. The models all must set up within 6 inches instead of within 3. But they suffer a mortal wound on a roll of a 1, 2, or 3 rather than a 1. So it's much more deadly, but some may survive and get out. Any disembarking model that cannot be set up within 6 inches is destroyed. Okay, shooting phase. How far through are we? 20 out of 60 odd. Models eligible to shoot unless it advanced or fell back. Select a target for all of its raised weapons. At least one model in the target unit must be visible, while G. Models with more than one raised weapon can shoot them at the same or different targets, but models cannot split attacks from the same weapon across more than one target. Yeah, works for me. Models in the same unit can shoot at different targets. Now there's a couple of individual rules on here. Lone operative. Unless it's attached to a unit, this unit can only be selected as the target of a ranged attack if the attacking model is within 12 inches. So basically, you can't shoot at characters unless they're close. Then, stealth. If every model in a unit has this ability, each time a ranged attack is made against it, subtract 1 to hit. Okay, making ranged attacks. Roll the number of dice equal to the attack characteristic. Resolve against one unit before moving on to another one. Resolve all the attacks for the same weapon before moving on. Locked in combat. Units cannot shoot whilst within engagement range of enemy units. Units cannot shoot at targets within engagement range of enemy units. This is what we're used to. Now this is where this is very possibly one of my favourite things in the new edition. Big guns never tire. Monsters and vehicles can shoot and be shot at even when they are in engagement range of enemy units at -1 to hit, unless you're shooting with a pistol. So pistols, you can shoot at vehicles without the -1. Or a vehicle with a pistol? That doesn't seem likely. But or maybe a monster with a pistol. Maybe some of those Tyranid bioweapons and pistols. But that might come up. There's nothing in here, though, about the old 9th Ed thing about you have to declare all your targets and you can only fire at distant units if the nearby unit is destroyed. None of that. None of that. Your tank can sit there crawling with gene stealers, firing shells at their intended target, whilst one crew member's on the comm going, "Get them off! Get them off! Get them off!" But I still keep firing. I like that a lot. I like that a lot. And, just because there are, a couple of guardsmen being hacked up by a Carnifex doesn't stop the commander going, "Last cannons, fire!" Because, to be fair, those troopers they stand a lot better chance of the incoming last cannon fire than they do against the Carnifex. Overall, if I were them, I'd take those odds. Then, making attacks. Rolling to hit with your ballistic skill or your weapon skill. A critical hit is an unmodified roll of 6. It's always successful. 1s always fail. A roll can never be modified by more than -1 or +1. Regular viewers will know that that's one of my house rules. I ignore that entirely because shooting at something invisible whilst you're running and carrying a cumbersome weapon should be 3 times as hard as the individual -1s. It makes absolutely no narrative sense, and that is purely there for competitive balance. So I ignore. Wounds. Critical wounds, and a modified roll of 6 is a critical wound. Now, so these critical hit and critical wounds come into it on keywords much later on. It's part of the streamlining, and I think they've streamlined very well. I think there's the right amount of streamlining in here. It feels like it will play very smoothly. And the last one of the wounds, a wound roll can never be modified by more than -1 or -2. See my thoughts on hit roll modifiers. So I will be disregarding that in my games. I'm going to need to do a new house rules thing for the wall in the garage. Sorry, studio. Allocate attack. If a model of the target unit has already lost any wounds, it must be allocated to them first. Saving throws. It's a standard saving throw shenanigans with roll a d6, apply the modifier. 1 always fails. A saving throw can never be improved by more than +1. Disregard that as well, I do. Sorry, Yoda talk there. Disregard that as well, I do. Yeah, you've been placed in psychic armour, and you're behind a barricade, and this, and that. Yeah, it's harder to kill you. So, it's another one I should be ignoring. Invulnerable saves, yeah, you can't modify them. Inflict damage. A model loses a number of wounds equal to the attack's damage characteristic. I mean, none of this has changed. Mortal wounds. Each mortal wound inflicted causes one model in that unit to use a mortal wound, to lose 1 wound. But because it says each, it's apply 1, apply 1, apply 1, which effectively means they spill over, but without them saying it's 3 wounds that spill over, they're saying it's 1 wound 3 times. No saving throws can be taken. Then we have 2 generic rules. We have feel no pain, X, where it just says the number. So if you shrug things on a 6+, it'll say feel no pain 6. Roll a 6 for each point, and they are not lost. Deadly demise. I like this. I like this because it's going to make things quicker to play. How many times have you gone, does it explode? I think it explodes, but what's the range? And how much damage is it? I'll just check. On Deadly Demise is now always on a 6. I imagine some things might change on the individual cards. And each unit within 6 inches suffers X mortal wounds, which I think is good. Right, now we're on to weapon abilities. Assault. Can be shot even if... Can be fired, I would have thought. Even if the bearer's unit advanced. Rapid fire. Rapid fire X. Increase the attacks by X when the target unit is within half range. Ignores cover. Ignores cover. Twin linked. Reroll to wound. Pistols. Can fire even within engagement range. Even when in engagement range. Cannot be fired. Well, basically, you can fire all your normal weapons or all your pistols. But monsters and vehicles can fire their pistols as well. Vehicles with pistols. Torrent is the auto-hitting word. Lethal hits. Each time you roll a critical hit, you auto-wound. So roll a 6 to hit, you go straight to armor save. You bypass the wounding stage. Lance. If a unit makes a charge, add 1 to wound. Indirect fire. If you can't see the target, it's -1 to hit and they count as being in cover. If you can't see one of the models. So if you can see the models, this bit doesn't apply. Precision. Basically, you can target characters that are attached to units as long as they are within line of sight. So if they're tucked behind a building and you can't see them, you can't shoot around corners. But if they're in a unit and you can see them and you have a precise weapon, bang. Blast, slightly different now. You add 1 to the attack characteristic for every 5 models in the target unit, rounded down. So you get 1 attack on 1 model. So you get 1 attack automatically, extra 1. For every 5 models in the unit, rounded down. Yeah, so 1 to 5 you get +1 attack. 6 to 10, +2 attacks. 11 to 15, 3 attacks. Okay. Not quite so big bada boom as it was in previous editions, but I guess it depends on how many attacks they give big blast weapons. Can never be used against a target that's within engagement range of units from the attacking model's army. So you can't fire an explosive shell at the enemy tank if your soldiers are fighting with it, but you can fire a las cannon. Kind of makes sense. Melter, increase the damage by X when the target was within half range. And heavy, add 1 to hit rolls if the bearer's unit remained stationary. So presumably heavy weapons on the cards will have a lower ballistic skill to start with. So a heavy bolter will probably be +4 for a marine rather than the auto +3. And then if you stay still you get +1 to it. Hazardous. So this is the old gets hot. I like what they've done with this. You roll a dice for each. Okay, it is slightly different. So it's not hit rolls of 1. If you roll a dice each time 1 dice per hazardous weapon used each time a unit fires. So if you're firing with 4 plasma guns and you're rapid firing, you make it 8 shots, then you roll 4 dice. For each one, a model equipped with a hazardous weapon is destroyed. However, characters, monsters and vehicles suffer 3 mortal wounds instead, which makes much more sense. So I like that. Devastating wounds. A critical wound inflicts mortal wounds equal to the weapon's damage instead of any normal damage. If you roll a 6 to wound, they get no save. Basically. Sustained hits X. Each critical hit scores X additional hits on the target. So if you have sustained hits 2, then for every 6 you roll to hit, you'll get an extra 2 hits, for instance. Extra attack. The bearer can attack with this weapon in addition to any other weapons it can make attacks with. So presumably it gives them the option to have some units that can break, like, I don't know, the pistol rule. Maybe they get to fire their pistols in addition because it's got the extra attacks rule, so they can fire that in addition to their bolters. Maybe. Anti keyword X plus. So on a modified wound roll of X plus against a target, with the matching keyword scores a critical wound. So if the target was orcs and it was 5, then every time you roll to wound against an orc on a 5 plus, you'll do a critical wound. Back to critical wounds, it means no saves, become mortal wounds. So I mean, a couple of those are a little wordy, but not half as bad as Ninth Ed was, and they seem to cover a lot of eventualities. They seem to mix and match in together well. So you could have a torrent weapon that causes devastating wounds, and then all it has to have on the card is this rule, this rule. All we've got to learn are these 12, 15 special rules. What's 5 there? 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. 20 odd. These 20 odd rules that when you know them, you can play any army. And when your opponent says to you, oh, it's got torrent, you know exactly what it is. rather than it's got flashy silver Prometheum jets. And what do they do? Well, on a Tuesday, if it's within the week of the full moon, then whenever you roll to hit, I can turn 1s into 2s. So the charge phase. Okay, so the very first thing that's just caught my eye is each time a unit makes a charge move, until the end of the turn, it has the Fights First ability. I prefer AOS, where you alternate. It makes charging less... Yeah, anyway. Okay, so charging, you roll 2d6. Must be within 12 inches, but do not need to be visible, your target, that is. If the distance roll is insufficient to move into engagement range with all the targets whilst maintaining unit coherency, the charge fails. So you have to have declared your target or targets. The distance must be sufficient to move into all of them. Doesn't mean you have to move into all of them, but it's the whole, if you charge the nearby unit and a distant unit, you get to... You fail even if you've scored a low value. Personally, I'd have preferred it if they just moved to the AOS method of you just roll and then pick where they go. It's just so much simpler. It plays quicker, and it doesn't make that much difference. Anyway, can't move within engagement range of a unit that wasn't the target of the charge. If successful, each model makes a charge move less than or equal to the charge roll, and must move into base-to-base contact with an enemy model if possible. So no more. I'm gonna stay 2 mil away, so I can move closer to the model by going round this way another 3 inches. No more of that. You got to try and get into base-to-base contact. Charging through terrain. You can move over 2-inch terrain freely, same as move. It's the same as movement. I don't know why they've got it hit off. I imagine to stop the "but charging isn't moving" conversation. I mean, this looks like almost exactly the same page, except you can change the word "charge" move from earlier on to "charge." Oh, yeah, so that's the charge phase. Right, the fight phase. Fights first. You've got 2 steps. Fights first and then remain in combat. You do all the fights first units first. Now, here's an interesting question. Okay, so I've answered it. It was a seamless cut there. This isn't summary text, this is body text. In both steps of the fight phase, players alternate selecting eligible units from their army, one at a time, starting with the player whose turn is not taking place, and fight with them. So if you have fights first units in your army that just have them natively, and you are charged, and those charging units gain fights first as a result of it, you will get to fight first. So in other words, if you're having fights first on your units that you then charge with doesn't guarantee you that you'll fight first. I'm not going to go into that anymore. I've probably just overcomplicated things for many, but in each step you alternate, starting with a person whose turn is not taking place. Right, to actually fight, we have pile in, make melee attacks, consolidate. So pile in, move 3 inches, move up to 3 inches. Every model must end closer to the closest enemy model. Oh, I wish they'd change that to units, it's so much easier. And in base-to-base contact with an enemy model if possible. The unit must end in unit coherency and within engagement range of at least 1 enemy unit, or no models can pile in. So you've got to try and get into base-to-base if you can, and again, you've got to end up closer to the enemy, to the nearest model. Melee attacks. It can make a melee attack if it's within engagement range of an enemy, or if it is in base-to-base contact with another model from its own unit that is itself in base-to-base contact with an enemy. I think that's good, because that's going to take away a lot of measuring. Is it an inch? Is it half an inch? Who's within range of this? And is he within range of... You can just see. Okay, yes, you do have to measure the engagement range from the models, but you have been told to pile them into base to base if you can. So it'll only be a couple of models in your unit that might not be in... It'll either be clear that they've not made it in, or they'll be in base to base. There will be a small proportion that are potentially within an inch. But for the rest of it, you can see visually. You can... Well, obviously everything that's seen is visual. But you don't have to measure the individual models. You can just go, yeah, they're touching, and then go. So I think that makes that easier. And that makes life significantly easier there, so I'm in favour of that. You use one of your weapons. You make a number of attacks equal to the characteristic of the selected weapon. Select targets for all weapons before any attacks are resolved. Resolve all attacks against one unit before moving on to another unit, or weapons before choosing a different weapon. And if the target for a weapon has died, you don't... If attacks declared against the target unit are resolved, even if no models from that unit remain within engagement range. So you still get to hit once you've declared the target. Equally, I guess if the unit's all dead, your attacks are wasted, which is still the case. Now here's a slight change. Consolidation. Up to 3 inches. Every model that moves, you don't have to move models, they can stay still, must end up close to an enemy model and in base-to-base contact if possible. So again, pushing that base-to-base thing. The unit must end in unit coherency and with an engagement range of at least one enemy unit if possible. If the above is not possible, each model can move towards the nearest objective marker, but this must result in the unit being in range of it and in unit coherency. If the above is not possible, no models can consolidate. So you can charge a unit that's holding an objective or near an objective. If you wipe them out, you may move closer to the objective if it gets you on it. I don't know why they've put that if it results in being in range of it. Surely it would just make sense. When I read that the first time, I just thought you could move towards the nearest objective marker. I thought that was nice because you're heading towards your goal. Still good, but watered it a little bit. Data sheets. Deployment abilities. Okay, Deep Strike. Has anyone ever stopped using the term Deep Strike? Unit can be set up in reserve instead of the battlefield, can be set up in your reinforcement step more than 9 inches horizontally away from all enemy models. Pretty much as we remember it. Scouts. Scout X can make a normal move of up to X before the first turn begins. If embarked in a dedicated transport, the transport can make the move instead. Must end this move more than 9 inches horizontally away from all enemy models. Infiltrators. During deployment, if every model in the unit has the ability when you set it up, it can be set up anywhere on the battlefield that's more than 9 inches horizontally away from the enemy deployment zone and all enemy models. The enemy deployment zone that irritates me. I like things sneaking around the side on deployment zones. Against enemy models is much better. I imagine that is to mean you don't have to have an infiltrator step in deployment, because anyway. Right, leaders. A character unit with the leader ability can be attached to one of their bodyguard units to form an attached unit. So I assume it will specify on the leader what the bodyguard units can be. Attached units can contain one leader. Attacks cannot be allocated to character models in attached units. So basically they die last. So they can charge with units. Hooray! Right. Stratagems. I think they've done a good job here. I like these. I'll help some of them anyway. Okay, so here is command reroll. It's still 1 CP, and it's still restricted to certain activities. To hit, to wound, a damage roll, a saving throw, an advanced roll, a charge roll, a desperate escape test, a hazardous test, or if you rolled a dice to determine the number of attacks made with a weapon for an attack model or unit from your army. I still won't be using them. I still find them just manipulation of statistics rather than the fun stuff. It also says a stratagem cannot be used more than once in the same phase. I'll still be ignoring that. That's still going to be part of my house rules because, why? If all your tanks are moving forward, why is only one of them using smokescreen? The rest of them go, no, we'll save ours for later. It's Bob's turn to be harder to hit. But isn't what they're for, Sarge? I'll have none of that, Private. I'll have none of that. It's their turn. We are not deploying our smokes field. Oh, is that fresh air? And burning. So no, shan't be doing that. They haven't made any attempt to separate the rules for competitive play and narrative play. It's all just one big rule set, which is a shame. It really wouldn't have taken them much just to have another little thing that says this applies for match play on a couple of these rules. I understand why they haven't. Disappointed by it though. It just means I have to house rule them. Counter-offensive. Still 2 CP. You can interrupt your opponent in the fight phase. Epic Challenge. In the fight phase, when a character unit from your army is in engagement range of one or more attached units is selected to fight. Target. So they've all got a sort of when target effect kind of thing. Makes them a bit simpler. If a little makes them simpler when you've read the whole thing, which is something I definitely did want because some of the other ones were just terrible. When one character model in your unit. Until the end of the phase, all melee attacks made by that model have the precision ability. So if you've got a character from your army fighting an enemy unit that has a character attached to it, you can gain the precision keyword and target all your attacks at that character. You can go hunting the bad guy. I like that. That's cool. Insane Bravery. 1 CP. In the battle shock, when is the battle shock step of your command phase, just after you failed a battle shock test unit from your army. Target a unit from your army that the unit's treated as having passed a battle shock test, and is not battle shocked as a result. Grenade. So grenades appear to have gone as a weapon. They're a stratagem now. When in your shooter phase, target one grenades unit from your army that's not within engagement range of enemy units. Select one enemy unit that's within engagement range, not within engagement range, and visible to your grenade unit. Roll 6d6. For each 4 plus, the enemy suffers a mortal wound. So it's presumably. That's just a streamlined way of putting all grenades in one. I guess part of me would have preferred. I still liked grenades, but I'm not going to lose any sleep over that. Nice and simple. Tank shock. Yes, I said tank shock. In your charge phase, one vehicle from your army. Until the end of the phase, after your unit ends a charge move, select one enemy unit from engagement range. Then select one melee weapon your unit is equipped with. Roll the number of d6 equal to that weapon's strength characteristic. If the strength characteristic is greater than the enemy's toughness, roll 2 additional d6. For each 5 plus, the enemy unit suffers 1 mortal wound. So if you've got a Land Raider that's strength 8, and you're charging it at, does it say more than double? Yeah, and you're charging that at guardsmen, who are presumably toughness 3, so you're more than double. You'd roll 10 dice, and for every 5+, the enemy unit suffers 1 mortal wound. Brackets to a maximum of 6 mortal wounds. Another thing I ignore. It's either devastating or it's not. That's part of the story. But I guess not great in competitive play. Which I don't do. So I won't be doing that. Rapid Ingress. When, at the end of your movement phase, target 1 unit from your army that's in reserves. Effect. Unit can arrive on the battlefield as if it were the reinforcement step of your movement phase. Restriction. You can't bring it on in a battle round it wouldn't be allowed to arrive in. So, for a rapid ingress command point, these are all 1 CP so far, by the way, apart from counteroffensive. You can bring units in your opponent's movement phase, so you can almost sort of dangle a carrot of a tempting target for them to go for. When they've moved towards it and gone for it, you can deep strike your unit in for a CP. Of course, you still have to stay 90 inches away from them and all that jazz. But yeah, I like that. That's some good reactionary stuff. Right, Fire Overwatch. So Overwatch has changed. I get the impression from talking to some folks who play it that some of this might be... people have talked about Heresy and Heresy having reactions. So I don't know if some of these draw inspiration from those things that... in Heresy, so I may be saying something. Oh, this is interesting. This is new, and someone's just going to say it's just Heresy, mate. And I'm like, oh, okay. Fire Overwatch has also changed. It's so when you can use it is in your opponent's movement or charge phase just after a unit set up or an enemy unit starts or ends a normal, advance, fallback, or charge move. Then one unit from your army that's within 24 inches is eligible to shoot as if it were the shooting phase. Restrictions, you only hit on 6s. I would far rather this was 2 CP and you got your full ballistic skill or just a -1 to hit, because it would have felt a little bit more like proper flow of combat rather than just sort of bang. I mean, these guys are waiting for it. Incoming fire, etc. Go to ground. In your opponent's shooting phase, just after an enemy unit has selected its target's 1 infantry unit from your army that was selected as a target, all models in the unit gain a 6+ invulnerable save and have the benefit of cover. So, yeah, I like that. Take cover! Smokescreen. In the enemy shooting phase, just after its selected targets, 1 smoke unit from your army that was selected as a target. To the end of the phase, all models in the unit have the benefit of cover and stealth. So I think cover does... We'll come on to cover. Cover does your armour, stealth does minuses to hit. And heroic intervention. I like this as well. 2 CP. This is the only other one that's 2 CP. When in your opponent's charge phase, just after the enemy unit ends a charge move, 1 unit from your army that is within 6 inches, not 3, of an enemy unit that will be eligible to declare a charge against an enemy unit if it were your charge phase. So a unit within 6 inches, the unit that's just charged, can now declare a charge against that enemy unit and resolve as if it were your charge phase. You can only select a vehicle unit if it's a walker. Even if the charge is successful, your unit does not receive any charge bonus this turn. Well, fair enough. So it's going to be a lot harder for people to melee snipe at particular units and engage the soft target but stay a couple inches away from the hard melee unit, because the hard melee unit can now go get into them and charge. Nice. Right, strategic reserves. At first I looked at this and thought, oh my god, this is rah, 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 rah. But then the penny dropped as to what it actually was, and I thought, so before the battle you can place units into strategic reserve. You can't put fortifications in. Good. And the maximum number of points you can put in is 25% of the total points unit, the points value of the battle. They're not deployed at the start of the battle. Strategic reserve units can arrive in the reinforcement step of your movement phase from the second round onwards. Those that aren't on the battlefield at the end of the battle count as destroyed. During the second battle round, you can set them up wholly within 6 inches of any battlefield edge, not in the enemy deployment zone. From the third battle round, set them up wholly within 6 inches of any table edge. Cannot be set up within 9 inches of enemy models. So, strategic reserves were a thing in 9th Ed, but I found them kind of clunky and a bit of a pain to use. And the where they can come on and in what turns was really kind of... It felt like a hassle, and I never really used them. I quite like this. Because from turn 3 they can come on anywhere you want. Okay, you've got to stay 9 inches away, but you're not sort of restricted to halfway up the battlefield, but not within 3 inches of anyone who's got a lunchbox. Yeah, like that. That could be quite good, I think. Right, terrain features. And this... Oh no, there is more. I thought we were getting near to the end. Not near to the end. Benefit of cover. Benefit of cover adds 1 to armor saving throws against the attacks. Multiple instances are not cumulative. Yeah, makes sense. And then here is the rule I despise the most in the book. Does not apply to models with a save of 3+ or better against attacks with AP of 0. So, if a Space Marine is behind a concrete barricade next to a Cascarin, it was a 4+ save, and the Cascarin gets shot, their save increases to 3 because projectile weapons or laser weapons passing through a concrete barrier are in some way slowed down by the fact that they have to get through all that concrete before it hits the Cascarin. So it gets +1 save. The bullets that are fired at the Space Marine mysteriously just phase through the wall and hit the Space Marine with the full force. No, that's... And I understand from a game point of view why they don't want Space Marines having a 2+ save in cover. But it's what happens. That is what cover is. That's, being behind a large concrete object makes it harder to kill you. So, no, I shall be ignoring that, but that is what the rule is. That will be on my house rule board before you can say anti-disestablishmentarianism. Anti-distinctly munty. Right, we're on to individual terrain pieces now. Rather than having a dozen special rules, they've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 types of terrain. So I guess you can just go around and go, that's that, that's that, that's that. And it's moderately intuitive, I would say. Right, craters. Doesn't affect movement, doesn't affect visibility. Infantry units gain the benefit of cover whilst they're in the crater. Super. Movement. doesn't affect movement. Sorry, barricades and fuel pipes doesn't affect movement, doesn't affect visibility. Affects engagement range. Basically, if there's a pipe or barricade in between you and the enemy model, it's 2 inches. So you can attack someone on the other side of a barricade. If a benefit of cover, if a model's within 3 inches of the terrain feature and it's not wholly visible, then they get cover. Battlefield debris and statuary. So that can be all sorts of things. When on the picture here, it's got plasma generators and cranes and a statue. Movement. Can move up and down the terrain feature, but cannot be set up or end any kind of move on it. Sorry, barricades and fuel pipes said the same. Which, bit of common sense with that, I think. And the debris and statuary. Normal visibility rules apply. When an attack is allocated to a model, if the unit's not fully visible, it gets the benefit of cover. So if you've got some that are out in the open, and you allocate the wound to them, no cover. If you're then allocating wounds to models that are partially obscured by the cover or are behind it because you've done a lot of damage and it's flowing into the unit, they get the benefit of cover. Then we have a whole load of things lumped in together. Hills, industrial structures, sealed buildings and armoured containers. Basically solid stuff. Movement. Ooh, I didn't read this. 1 minute. Yes, I did. So here's where they introduce effectively something new where, and this applies to a couple of terrain features, models can only be set up on the item if no part of their base overhangs. So cargo container, put a space marine on top of it, the base doesn't hang over the side. Put a Carnifex on it, and the base hangs over, so you can't put a Carnifex on it because the base hangs over the side. Maybe that represents the lack of structural integrity of the cargo container, or the small area it can't get the purchase or the balance on it. I have no problem with that as long as some common sense is applied. If there's, it's one thing trying to balance something half on and there's like a massive chunk of the base that's not on it. That's fair enough. Most of us wouldn't be playing like that anyway, I assume. But if it's a space marine and there's a couple of mil over the edge, common sense, as far as I'm concerned. And again, if you can't all be, if the model that's taking damage can't be seen, it gets the benefit of cover. Isn't wholly visible. Woods are a little different. Basically, if you're in a wood or behind a wood, you are never considered to be fully visible and therefore gain the benefit of cover. It's the short version. There's also a thing about agreeing the footprint of the woods with your opponent before the start of the game, which makes sense. Then ruins. Again, there's a thing about agreeing the footprint with your opponent. Infantry and beast models in ruins can move through the walls and such as if they're not there. Infantry, beasts and flying models can end on any level of the terrain feature, but the overhanging base rule applies. So the no part of the base may be overhanging. Visibility, you can see into and out of ruins, no problem, but you can't see, how is it wording it? These terrain things don't have the little handy boxes with just a couple of bullet points on them. No, you can't see to the models cannot see over or through this terrain feature unless they are aircraft or towering. So you can't see through it. You can see into it, you can see out of it. then there's something that just feels totally incongruous with the entire slimming down purpose of the edition. Ruins also have the plunging fire rule. I mean, I like the rule, but it just seems really odd to have a random additional bit of complexity in this edition. Plunging fire. If you're shooting with a unit that's more than 6 inches above ground level, and you're shooting at a target that is all entirely on ground level, you improve your AP by 1. I mean, it makes sense. The most visible part of the target will be its head. So that kind of makes sense. I'd have said +1 to wound rather than the AP, but maybe that's a balancing thing because the pluses and minuses, according to this book, are capped. This is really weird to have an AP-based random rule attached to ruins. Then we've got some pictures of example battlefields. Then we have rules for aircraft. First off, hover. I'm just looking to see if there's a summary for hover. Okay, actually, there's a bit more to this. When you are declaring formations, blah, 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 aircraft models must start the battle in reserves. Once the battle started, they're treated as strategic reserves for all rule purposes. Only units that are themselves placed into reserves can start the battle embarked within aircraft transport models that are in reserve. So, Storm Eagle, Raven, Storm Raven, Storm, Flying Land Raider, Flying Land Raider. That could get awkward with points and things. That's where, when I was looking at the points for strategic reserve and it was saying 25%, I was thinking, isn't there an easier way of saying number of units? I don't know, maybe some common sense there. Or maybe that's just for, I just need to tweak that for narrative scenarios when I'm playing. I'm just thinking out loud now. Okay. So they can come, but when they come on, they can come on from the side and the thing, and in the from turn 3 onwards, they can come from that way. Hover. So when you start the game, you can declare hovering units. You can declare aircraft to be in hover mode. It loses the aircraft keyword and the associated rules for being an aircraft. Gains a move characteristic of 20. They do not have to start in reserve, but you can choose to place them in strategic reserve following the normal rules if you wish. So you have to declare if your unit is... So, okay, ooh, not very keen on this. Your units that can hover either have to be aircraft or hovering for the whole game, is what this seems to be saying. I don't like that. I like the way things can go into hover mode. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. Anyway, the aircraft rules. Aircraft can only make a normal rule move and can do so even with engagement range of any models. Must move forward at least 20 inches and then can make one pivot of up to 90 inches. Aircraft that cross the edge of the battlefield cannot make them or cannot make their minimum move are placed into strategic reserve. Aircraft and the movement of other models. Model units can still make normal and advanced moves even if they are only within engagement range of enemy aircraft. Models can move within engagement range of enemy aircraft, but cannot move within cannot end their move within engagement range of enemy aircraft. You can walk under them. Models can move over aircraft when they're making any kind of move. Okay. fighting. Only units that can fly can charge or make melee attacks against aircraft. Aircraft cannot charge, pile in, or consolidate, can only make melee attacks against units that can fly. When a model piles in or consolidates, unless it can fly, ignore the aircraft keyword for determining the closest model. Huh? Oh, right. Okay. So for those people on the ground, if you're piling in, you don't have to go nearer to the plane that's all the way up there, that just happens to have a base on the table because it can't actually fly. Right, there's a section here on mustering the army. Select battle size, start your army roster, select your faction, select attachment rules, select units, unit selection. So, you contain 3 units on with the same data sheet, or up to 6 if it's a battle line or dedicated transport. I see that making things a lot easier. For pick-up play and competitive play. It's not going to make much difference to narrative play. Then select Warlord. And then lastly, we're on to missions. There is one mission in this book, only war. But what I do want to go through is, well, I say go through, the objective marker stuff. But the mission sequence is muster armies, read mission objectives, create battlefield, determine attacker and defender, declare battle formations, deploy armies, and it will list any restrictions for how to set up, determine first turn, resolve pre-battle rules, begin battle, end battle, determine victor. Okay, Victor. So lastly, objective markers. Model is within range of an objective marker if it is within 3 inches horizontally and 5 inches vertically. Level of control. Add the OC characteristics of all the player's models within range of that objective marker. The highest an objective marker is controlled with the player with the highest total. A tie, it is contested. And this is weird and odd, and I'll be ignoring. Models cannot end a move on top of an objective marker. That requires some common sense. Depends what the objective is. The objective's a landmine. Okay, let's not stand on the landmine. The box of landmines. Okay. What is it? It's this field. Okay. But don't step on that bit. Why not? Because there's a little rune in my heads-up display saying, that's the bit we're protecting. But I can't stand there, you say. Correct. Why, boss? Look, stop asking awkward questions, or you'll be on latrines for a week. Yes, boss. And that, as they say, is it. Well, I say is it. Then it comes on to combat patrol. Now, I'm not going to go through this in a lot of detail, except to say I can't see anything. There's 6 missions, 6 combat patrol missions. They look like they might be a bit of fun. I can't see anything that says this is actually going to be a different game, other than you play it on a smaller table and you have to use a combat patrol box. It's not a small version of the game where you pick what army you want with restrictions. It's you have to take a preset combat patrol that is itself a thing, which I get that this is an entry level. This is the entry level version of the game. And that kind of makes sense. And if you have a combat patrol, you can play against any other combat patrol. But can we not have a... I think it would have made a bit more sense to have a version of the game that could then be used by everyone with small forces. The old combat patrol back in the day of 4th Ed used to be a 400-point game with a different force organisation chart. So you can only take one HQ, up to 1 elite, No, 1 to 2 elites, 1 to 3, 0 to 2 elites. No, 0 to 1 elites. I'm right. 0 to 1 elites, 1 to 3 troops, 0 to 3 fast, and 0 to 1 heavy. So basically, you could take some troops, some fast stuff, and a couple of little bits. You couldn't major on anything, and it made it a nice little skirmishy version of the game for small battles that took less than an hour. And they were a lot of fun. They look like they're a lot of fun if you've just bought the Combat Patrol box, but could we not have had a little version of the game that we could just make generic lists up to a certain point value? Maybe not. Anyway, that is the end of the review of this here 10th Ed rulebook. In summary, there are a lot of things I like that they've done. I like what they've done with stratagems. I think they're good. I like some of the rules tweaks they've put, like vehicle shooting and stuff like that. I think they have done some good streamlining of universal rules that are going to make the game a lot easier to play. I like the fact they're putting the game on cards. It doesn't really come into this book, but it will make a big difference to play. I've been a big advocate of cards being an Age of Sigmar player. They make life so much easier when playing Age of Sigmar. The stuff I'm not so keen on is mostly stuff that persists from previous editions. The capping of pluses and minuses doesn't work for me narratively. The capping of how cover works if you already have a decent save, again, I don't feel that works narratively. And a couple of similar things. I'm not keen on the fact that you have to choose hover or aircraft for the whole game. I'm not so sure about that. But on the whole, this feels like a significant improvement on 9th edition, and I'm looking forward to seeing the units and the cards and the indices to see if we have got that level of simplicity with those as well. But so far, looks positive. Well, I hope you found that useful. Yeah, and if you're interested in seeing what comes in the box, there will be an unboxing video available that will be on the site at the same time as this. Yes, there will. Okay, until then, take care, folks, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.